When I was around 7 or 8 years old, my mom would usually take my brother and me trick-or-treating. But this one year, she dropped me off at my friend Sean's house after school. Sean, Johnny, and I had planned to go trick-or-treating together. Johnny and Sean were both a year older than me, and we had met while I was playing with my brother on the block. They lived just around the corner from me. Sean's family was different from mine. His sister was much older, around 20 years old, and seemed to take care of him. Whenever I went over to his house, it always smelled like cats, and his sister was always with a new guy. She never really acknowledged me, like she didn't care I was there. Sean's dad wasn't in the picture, and his mom worked a lot, often out of town. I only met her a few times, so I didn't know much about her. On this Halloween, my mom had dropped me off at Sean's, expecting his mom to come with us. But it turned out she wasn't coming. I felt uneasy about it because it was just the three of us, Sean, Johnny, and me. But I was also kind of excited that we would have some freedom without any parents around. I knew my mom wouldn't have been happy about it, though. We started trick-or-treating around 5 p.m. and didn't stop until it was pretty late. It was a Friday, so we didn't have school the next day, and we were determined to fill up our pillow sacks with as much candy as possible. After a few hours, we took a break and went back to Sean's house. He heated up some frozen pizzas, and we watched Halloween specials on Nickelodeon while eating. Johnny eventually had to go home, but Sean and I wanted to keep going. By now, it was getting dark, and there weren't as many trick-or-treaters out. We decided to explore a new block and knock on doors we hadn't visited yet. As we walked, we noticed a man pushing a stroller. He was walking slowly, and we thought maybe he was out trick-or-treating with his child. He was getting closer, and eventually he stopped and said, "How's the trick-or-treating going, boys?" We replied that it was good, and he said, "It's pretty late. I'm heading home. I have some extra candy. Would you guys like it?" Sean and I looked at each other, thinking we had just hit the jackpot. The man said he didn't get a chance to give out much candy because he wanted to take his daughter out for a walk. We couldn't see his daughter because she was covered by a folding top on the stroller. He said she was asleep, but pointed down the street and said his house was just up ahead. We decided to follow him. As we walked, he made small talk, asking where we were from and what school we went to. He kept leaning into the stroller, talking to his daughter in a high-pitched voice, but when he turned back around to us, he was always smiling. I began to feel a little uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything. Finally, we reached his house. He led us up the walkway, unlocked the door, and invited us in. Sean walked inside, and I hesitated. I asked if we could leave the door open, and the man paused but said, "Sure. No problem." He told us to wait while he got the candy, but when he brought the stroller inside and set it down, I noticed Sean suddenly acted strange. He nudged me, whispering, "Let's go." He ran out the door, and I hurried after him. My pillow sack was heavy, but I kept running, not fully understanding what was happening. Once outside, we heard a woman's voice call out, "Excuse me." She came running over to us and asked if we knew the man. That's when Sean told her everything. He said the man had a fake baby in the stroller. I was shocked and got goosebumps. The woman said, "That man doesn't have a child. I saw him walking by with a fake baby." She offered to take us home in her car, and we accepted. I know getting into a stranger's car wasn't the smartest decision, but at that point, we were just scared. The woman drove us home and even came to my door to talk to my mom. My mom was upset when I told her everything that had happened. She sent me to my room while she called the police. They never told me what happened to the man, and I think they wanted to keep me sheltered from the situation. After that night, my mom didn't want me going to Sean's house anymore. I still saw Sean at school sometimes, but our friendship was never the same after that. It was Halloween night in 2016, and my parents gave me the job of handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. My mom had bought way too many bags of candy, and I knew we'd have tons left over. I wasn't too happy about it because I was trying to lose weight, and I'd probably end up snacking on them for days, if not weeks. I always told her she bought more than necessary. We lived in a cul-de-sac at the end of a street, so we didn't usually get many trick-or-treaters. However, there were a few loyal kids who came by every year because they knew we handed out lots of candy. That year, Halloween fell on a Monday. I was in college, and luckily, I had Mondays and Wednesdays off that semester. So earlier in the day, I went to the gym and worked on some assignments. It was around 4 p.m. when I first heard the sound of kids outside, signaling that the trick-or-treaters were out and about. The first knock at the door came somewhere between 4 and 5 p.m. The rest of the evening went as expected, handing out candy to kids while my dog, Vito, barked at every single doorbell ring. From the first trick-or-treater until 8 p.m., it was pretty much the same routine. By 8 p.m., there had only been about 10 to 15 trick-or-treaters in total. Like I mentioned earlier, our cul-de-sac was a bit out of the way, so most people just skipped our street and kept going. Since it was a Monday night, everything quieted down much earlier than usual. I had made good progress on my homework and projects, so after that, I had some of my mom's leftover stew and headed to my room to relax. I started watching Game of Thrones, and was 2 episodes in when something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang again. My dog, Vito, started barking like crazy. I glanced at the clock. It was around 9:30 p.m. way past the usual time for trick-or-treaters. Curious, I went downstairs to the front door and opened it. Standing on the other side of the glass storm door was a tall man dressed in a creepy clown costume with a frightening mask. I could tell it was a man because of his build. He waved at me and pointed to the brown sack he was holding, which looked almost empty. I didn't feel comfortable, so I didn't open the storm door. I just said through the glass, "Sorry, we don't have any more candy," and quickly shut the door. I locked it immediately and regretted even answering in the first place. I had assumed it was just a kid or maybe a parent who got a late start. I thought maybe it was just a parent who had worked late, trying to get in some last-minute trick-or-treating with their kids, but whoever was at my door wasn't a kid and definitely not a teenager. This person was huge, and the clown costume made them look even bigger. Thankfully, I hadn't grabbed the candy bag when I answered the door, so they wouldn't know I was lying about being out of candy. I stayed by the door for a moment, listening for footsteps to see if they would leave. But instead of walking away, the doorbell rang again. Vito started barking like crazy once more. Vito, my rat terrier, isn't exactly intimidating. His bark is more annoying than scary, and he definitely wouldn't be able to defend the house from anyone trying to break in. I picked him up, turned off the downstairs lights, and carried him upstairs, hoping the person outside would think I wasn't coming back to the door. I put Vito in my room and shut the door so he wouldn't keep barking. Standing at the top of the stairs, I listened closely. That's when I heard a loud sound from the front door. It was the storm door being forced open. There was a snap, like the latch had been broken. Then, I heard knocking on the front door, followed by the sound of the door handle moving around. At that point, I felt uneasy and panicked. I decided to hide in my room. Feeling really unsettled, I texted my family group chat to tell them what was happening, but no one responded. I figured whoever was at the door would eventually get bored and leave. I thought about texting my friends, but none of them were tall enough to match the person I saw. So I just tried to resume my show, hoping to forget about the whole thing. What else could I do? But then, the doorbell rang again. This was starting to feel like a nightmare. I kept telling Vito to stay quiet, and I had already closed my blinds because I didn't want that creepy clown knowing what room I was in. I tried calling my dad, but he didn't answer. Then I called my brother. When he picked up, I could tell he wasn't alone, probably with a girl. I told him to check my texts. There was someone dressed as a clown at the door who wouldn't leave. My brother just brushed it off, saying it was probably a Halloween prank and told me to ignore it. He sounded in a rush, so I hung up, hoping he was right. It did make sense that it could be a prank, and after a few minutes of sitting on the edge of my bed anxious, the doorbell didn't ring again. I started to feel a bit more relaxed and laid back down. I slowly began drifting off to sleep. I hadn't even slept long enough to dream when I woke up to Vito growling quietly. He was waiting for me to say something, like he was trying to warn me. I told him to hush and he stopped, but I noticed he was staring at the window. I listened closely and heard a faint sound, soft thumping and something lightly rubbing against the glass. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I figured no one could be outside my window. Still, I was curious, so I got up and peeked through the blinds. I was wrong. There, staring right at me, was the man in the clown costume. His creepy mask was pressed against the window. He tilted his head, staring at me. I screamed as loud as I could, but Vito didn't bark. Maybe I was too scared to notice anything else, but I grabbed my phone and ran to my parents' bedroom, locking the door behind me as I dialed 911. I was shaking all over and my voice was trembling as I talked to the operator. I kept begging them to send the police quickly. The operator kept telling me the same thing. They were coming as fast as they could. It felt like an eternity, but the police arrived in about 10 minutes. They checked around the house for any signs of a break-in. The only thing they found was the broken latch on the storm door. But what really terrified me was what they found outside my bedroom window, my dad's ladder. The man had gone into our storage shed, grabbed the ladder, and used it to climb up to my window. After that, I didn't feel safe staying home. I went to spend the night at my friend Adam's house. To this day, I don't know if it was just a twisted Halloween prank or if something much worse was about to happen. Either way, it still haunts me that someone could have used Halloween as an excuse for something so terrifying.